I want to welcome you to our very first Flexible Work Unleashed series. I was thinking back about today being Leap Day, and that happens every 4 years. And I was thinking back to where was I 4 years ago? Well, I think the beginning of what started to be one of the greatest changes to the way we work in our workforce. And I want to start off with a thanks to all of you from us for jumping in so quickly overnight and learning a new way to manage and work. And we know it wasn't easy. And we're now living in an ever-changing, dynamic, and ever-evolving new way to work. And so one of the things that about 2 or 3 years ago, when we discovered that we were in this new way of work and trying to figure it out really quickly, the HR team in Ithaca started working very closely with the HR team at Weill Cornell Medicine to start talking about practices and resources and ways we could work together to try to best support this new way of working. And one of the wonderful things that came out of us working so closely together on this in the last couple of years has been the idea of what more can we do to support our managers. You guys have really been pinch hitting and doing a great job on trying to navigate this new way of working, but what more can we do to support you? And the idea of this new series came forward. So this series is for you, and our goal is to really be able to provide you with practical tips, information, and resources to help you as we all are moving forward with navigating this new way of working. So before I get started, I just want to do some quick introductions and acknowledgements. So for those who don't know me, I'm Linda Croll Howell, and I'm the Senior Director of Employee Experience with the HR team located in Ithaca, New York. And there are a few members of our team, our HR team in Ithaca, New York, who worked on putting this together that I just want to quickly acknowledge, and then I'm going to bounce to Eric at Weill Cornell to introduce himself and his team. So Ellie Zimmerman, who is our relatively new flexible work consultant, as well as Jerry Dace and Ashley Fazio on our HR communications team have been very much behind the scene in putting this together. And Eric, if you want to do quick intros on the Weill Cornell Medicine side, that'd be awesome.
Thanks, Linda. It's always a pleasure working with you and your team, and we really appreciated the opportunity to work together on this particular initiative. So good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Eric Saidel, the Interim Senior Director of HR for Weill Cornell Medicine. And joining me behind the scenes today and helping to put this event together from the Weill side, I just wanted to acknowledge Danielle Gabor, who's our Director of Business Transformation and Strategy, and then 2 members of the HR team, Linda Smith, our Director of HR Services, and Peter Lofrumento, who's our Director of Operational Communications.
Great, and it's been a wonderful, this is a wonderful One Cornell initiative. So we have managers from Weill Cornell Medicine and managers from all over all the other Cornell operations here today. So welcome to all of you. And once again, a big thanks for jumping in so quickly and trying to figure out this new way of working. So some general logistics for you to be aware of. We are recording all of these sessions for future viewing. We know we had, believe it or not, almost 400 people sign up to this, so we were thrilled about that. But we also know last minute things happen and not everyone was able to watch that. So our plan will be to record these going forward. We're planning to try to have one of these every other month, and we really would love to hear from you if there's certain topics you'd like us to dive into deeper to focus on during these sessions, which leads me to the next piece, which is your names or your questions and comments are not going to show up on any of the recordings. You will see there's a question feature that you can enter a question in, and you can do it either in your name or anonymously, that just those who are behind the scene looking at those will see that. If you have ideas for topics you'd like us to focus on for future sessions, you can put them in there as well. We have a lot of content up front and awesome panelists, which we'll share with you in a second. I'll introduce you to those in a second. So we have some questions that we've set up for them to kind of address up front, and then we're going to try to save a tiny bit of time at the end to address any questions that have been put in. Whoever we can't get to question-wise, we will be following up a week or so after this with a copy of the recording, some resources, and maybe some of the answers to some of the questions we weren't able to get to. So just around logistics on that. So without further ado, I want to start by introducing our panelists. I don't usually like to read from papers, but I also want to make sure I don't forget anything. So I am going to be reading from paper as we get through to introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Marie Carter. Marie, I don't know if you want to just...
Hello. Good to see everybody.
So Marie Carter, MPA, is the Executive Director of Practice Access and Operations at Weill Cornell Medicine. She served many roles in her tenure there, including within a clinical department as operations administrator and centrally in the physician organization as a senior analyst, supporting the implementation of Epic registration and scheduling systems. Marie is committed to streamlining operational workflows to improve the experiences of our patients, providers, and staff. She has a proven track record of building strong collaborative partnerships at all levels within our complex healthcare organization. So that's Marie. Then we also have with us Dr. Shenita Brokenburr, who is a course instructor with or has been a course instructor with eCornell for the past 3 years. And her courses have focused on helping managers through this new flexible and remote work environment, which she'll share a little bit more with you on that. In addition to being one of our instructors, Shenita also owns an HR advisory, coaching, and consulting firm in the DC area. Before joining eCornell, Dr. Brokenburr worked as an HR executive, a chief human resources officer, as well as a part-time faculty member for 30 years. So that's Shenita. Shenita, you want to say?
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
And then finally, we've got Erin Mulrooney. Erin Mulrooney, who recently in the last few weeks was a recipient of Cornell's George Peter Award. It's an award that we give out on the Ithaca campus. Is the Associate Dean for Administration for Cornell Engineering, and she oversees administration, finance, facilities, human resources, data analysis, and IT for the College of Engineering. Erin has been in higher education administration for over 30 years, and in addition to being with Cornell for about 7.5 years now, she held leadership positions at University of Chicago and Penn. Eric is certified executive coach and holds an MS of organizational dynamics from the University of Pennsylvania and is an executive certificate in academic leadership from the Wharton School. And for those of you who've been around the Ithaca area, especially during the summer months in the active music scene, you gotta hear Erin's voice. She's an awesome vocalist with a local blues band. So without further ado, I'm going to pass off to Eric, who is going to start talking with our panelists.
Thanks, Linda. All right, let's get started. You know, I was thinking about the fact that today is Leap Day, and I think that we're going to leap right into this discussion and let's explore amazing perspectives. Leap. Let's explore amazing perspectives together. So what I'd like to do is start with each of our panelists and just give us a quick overview of your current workplace and what's flexible about it. You know, do you have remote workers? Do you have hybrid workers? Kind of what's the setup in your respective areas? And what are your top of mind thoughts about it? You know, how do you approach it? How would you describe it to someone just so that they understand the environment in which you're working? Marie, let's start with you.
Great. So in my division, we have remote work, and we have 2 different buckets of staff that are unique. So one group is our Access to Care Contact Center, which is a contact center that is fully remote, that has over 200 staff members in it who report up through a director. And so they're completely remote. Then we have another group that is more focused on individual, sort of more independently run projects, and they work remotely as well. They interface with our clinical departments differently and with our leaders differently, but they are also remote. So we have set it up so that we are 90% remote, and that 10% allows for us to have in-person meetings as necessary or attend seminars as necessary. And so we are very flexible about how we utilize that extra 10%. We believe that we've thrived from this, and I can go into further detail a little bit later when the other panelists have given their feedback about their structure, but we have acclimated well to it. I have to say, due also to the excellence of our IT teams getting us set up appropriately and our HR team supporting process and sort of guidelines to do this. But I'm happy to stop there and let the other panelists weigh in as well.
Thanks, Marie. Really appreciate that. And the shout out for HR and IT as well. Erin, can you tell us a little bit more about your working environment?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. On the Ithaca campus, Cornell is wildly decentralized, and most colleges and units have set up their own operating rules around how flex work works. In the College of Engineering, we are also rather decentralized, and we've enabled each department and unit to come up with their own rules as well. We are much more of a flexible hybrid type of arrangement versus fully remote type of arrangement. We have a few tiny pockets and a handful of folks who are fully remote, but for the most part, some departments have everybody in person all 5 days, and some departments have either a 3+2 or a 4+1 kind of arrangement where folks are in the office a few days a week and working remotely 1 or 2 days a week. It seems to be working well. We touch base actively with our administrative leaders in all of our departments and units. And we, talk openly about how important it is to be aligned in expectations and have expectations really clear and have communication really clear around expected outcomes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about communication a lot over the course of this discussion, but thanks for that overview. Shenita, you're bringing two perspectives here for us today. You're bringing your academic perspective from your research and you're into this area and some of the perspectives you've gained, but also you are a worker and a manager yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about, the settings in which you work, what your experiences have been, as far as flexible workspace or environments?
So thanks for that, Eric. I am what we call a fractional HR executive. And so my company, Bridge Brain Trust, provides those services to different organizations across sectors. And what that means is if a company has a need for a CHRO, for instance, for about 6 months, I go in and I do that. If they have a similar need in another area, I go in and support them in that way. So I'm remote myself, and my experience with leading teams is that they love being hybrid and remote. But there are also some challenges with that, and that's where my role as course facilitator comes in with eCornell. So I'm the person who facilitates managing and leading hybrid teams at eCornell, and I think we're on our first or second run of the course. So we have students from Weill and from the main campus and Cornell, all over the Cornell ecosystem. So I get a special glimpse into some of the challenges that managers have at Cornell as an entire higher ed ecosystem. So unique perspective there.
Absolutely, and that's why we're so thrilled to have you as part of this conversation, along with Marie and Erin. So let's keep going with that thought, Shenita. What are you seeing? Thinking about leadership styles in this new world where we are all, living and working. What leadership styles do you think have proven most effective in managing either fully remote or, hybrid and flexible teams?
So I don't know if there is one particular leadership style, but I can say that all of the leadership styles that are successful have a couple of things in common. And that is that they are very inclusive, communicative, adaptable, flexible, and they're open. So all of those kind of characteristics we've seen not only in the literature, but I've experienced that myself in working with teams. Those characteristics work best in hybrid situations.
Great, thanks. That's really, really good to know. So Marie, Erin, what are your thoughts, in terms of what Shenita just shared and how you're seeing that work in each of your respective environments? Marie,
Yeah,
again, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with Shenita. And I think because I have two different sets of teams, they have really unique needs. And I have to be really flexible about how I approach communicating with them. But even more importantly, I like to say that I have to actually speak many different languages when I hire staff. I have to really understand what they're saying, the words they're using, and also what they're trying to get me to understand. And so that has been a super learning opportunity for me because there is a really diverse group that I lead. And I want to make sure that I continue to represent them well, but also to ensure that they are aligning with what our Weill Cornell medicine goals are and that they understand the mission. And one of the things I'll also say is, we're remote. It's so important to be even more communicative when you're remote to ensure that you're demonstrating the mission in ways that you wouldn't need to if you were all sitting in the same office together. They need to see you. They need to have access to you. They need to have, team meetings and one-to-one meetings. And I say all this acknowledging the privilege of having a smaller group to manage for the independent team, as well as how we have to get creative with team meetings for the 200 plus people teams. So there's a lot there, but I agree with Shenita that it really is about being flexible and open to trying different ways of reaching people and having them reach you.
That's a great point. Flexibility really does mean so many different things in this context. It's the schedules, it's the arrangements, but it's also the way we think as workers and more importantly as leaders, right? That we need to be flexible and recognize that. Now, Erin, you talked about this in our pre-meeting sessions as well, and I know you really have some very strong feelings and experiences or examples about the role of communicating, and keeping people engaged through, open and effective communication. Can you talk with us a little bit more about that?
Sure. And I also want to totally agree with Shenita's points. And I think that some of those points or those attributes are attributes for a leader in any situation, whether the workforce is all in person or hybrid or remote. I think we think back to a time that didn't ever really exist, of thinking that back in the day when everybody was in person all the time, we all got together and did things and everybody was on a team, and it wasn't great. And people communicate differently, as Marie just indicated. And some people are wildly introverted, some are wildly extroverted, some are somewhere on a spectrum in between that. Not everyone engages in the same way. And so I think as a good leader, you need to be intentional in how you communicate and how you engage folks. And you have to be even more intentional when you've got remote workforces or the hybrid workforces. And another, so again, the communicating piece is about a lot of different things. It's about what the expectations of the job are and the outcomes. It's about what's happening in the office, what's changed that's going to impact how you're doing what you're doing at this moment, or it's about, who's just announced that they're getting married and doesn't everybody want to congratulate them? So that goes to some of the team kinds of things. Yeah, I think that gets at some of it. It's
Okay. No, I hear you on that, for sure. I mean, as a leader myself, I certainly think about, struggling through some of those things and how do I make up for the fact that I'm no longer bumping into most of my team in our pantry, at the water cooler, at the coffee machine. One of the things that I've done is, I've created virtual office hours, again, especially even before coming into higher ed, this idea that everybody knows the blocks of time that are available on my camera and they can just pop in, they can send me a Teams message. If I'm in the office, they can come to my office, but wherever they are, they can, join me on Zoom or, on Teams for just a quick kind of check-in. They can reserve time with me or they can just pop in to those office hours in that sense. And it really, I think, helps, in some cases to foster that connection and for people to just not feel that they're kind of out there isolated all alone, when they're doing their work. But Shenita, from your research and from what you teach, can you talk about some of the other top engagement strategies that you're seeing that that are showing some success when we're talking about such a diverse workforce in terms of again, schedule, location, structure?
Yeah. So what you said, Eric, I lit up when you said the virtual office hours because when I was back doing my university CHRO work and at the beginning of the pandemic, that strategy was pure gold. To have your calendar open, to have the virtual office hours, and to just be transparent about where you are, whether you're, virtual or on site. So some other things that we're seeing in the engagement, in employee engagement with hybrid teams, Microsoft does virtual coffee chats where their employees jump online at a scheduled time. I know this worked for my own team, and the rule was bring your coffee, your tea, or whatever it is, your drink of choice except alcohol. Um, and no business talk, only, family and interesting things that happen to you, say over the weekend, etc. HubSpot is another example of employee engagement where they have birthday breaks. I don't know that we do this a lot in higher ed, but employees have a day off to recharge for their birthdays. The other thing that was really popular at the beginning, and it continues to be popular now, is to leverage your employee assistance programs to have virtual mindfulness sessions. And you do that, on a regular interval, etc. And then lastly, Slack channels for hobbies. If you have employees who sew like I do, or whatever they do, but it requires that you keep the pulse of what's happening in your group and on your team.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. There again, we do have to remember there's a whole nother level of diversity in the workplace now, that wasn't necessarily as visual, as obvious to us in the past, on so many levels. That leads me back, Erin, to something you were saying earlier about, the diversity of different structures and approaches within the College of Engineering and within the institution as a whole. Given that there are people in different locations, those who are working fully remote versus those who are, in a hybrid setting, and those who are actually on site every day. How do you manage? How can you manage such diversity like that? And really, we've touched on it a little bit. Marie talked about it, and we'll come back to you as well. But what have you found to be effective in terms of, really and literally meeting people where they are, given that they are in so many different places and settings?
It's kind of a balance back and forth. Thinking clearly about what is the job itself, and can that job be done in a remote or hybrid way, or does that job require the person to be on site? There are certain types of positions, our student-facing positions, for example, and this is not the case in every department, again, because everyone has their own way of doing things, but many of our departments have their student-facing folks in the office 5 days a week when semesters are active, and they have more hybrid opportunities or remote opportunities when there are breaks from classes. But making it clear when you're looking at the job description, understanding what are the opportunities, what will work, what won't work, making that clear in the job description where that's possible, making that clear when you're posting the job, which I think we do now, about whether or not this can be remote or hybrid. That doesn't stop the situation where somebody comes to you who's been an active employee, who's been terrific and a super valued member of your team, who's suddenly got some situation where they're moving across the country, but they want to remain an employee. And those cases get looked at on a case-by-case basis, again, depending on what the values are of each department in terms of how they look at hybrid work or remote work. Can that work or can that not work, and why? And again, it comes to communications, communicating clearly with the person who's asking for it, with the people around them who might feel upset if they don't have access to that as well, as to why you're making the decisions you're making.
Yeah.
There's no easy cut and dry black and white to any of this.
Yeah, and I think Marie, you were talking about that as well. Again, more so than ever, there's no one size fits all. But what are you seeing as again being effective in terms of creating connection, trust, and engagement across your hybrid and remote workers?
Yeah, life keeps happening to people, and you never get sort of a plan of what life's going to actually do. So a couple of things. I think that many of my team members who may be further along in their career are really welcoming to sort of the remote communication, the one-to-ones that are remote, because they're squeezing a lot of things into their days, and they can multitask those things. What I have found, though, is that people who are recently out of school can't fondly remember the structure of coming into an office and having a team around them, and they struggle a little bit more, frankly. Those folks and people who are naturally extroverted, they really want to see you physically, they want to kind of interact. And this is something I'm continually working on. I have not found the one solution, but trying to go in once or twice a month or once or twice a few months to meet with somebody in person, yields dividends I never expected. They really appreciate the fact that a leader is even attempting to do that. Again, it's super hard because we do have such a diverse group. So we're constantly trying to be open. And I think someone asked about what does open mean? I think in terms of how I'm looking at it is understanding that we have a structure in place and we have guidelines in place, but understanding that sometimes this is all new territory, especially at Weill Cornell. We may need to explore or pilot a different way of thinking as long as it aligns with our general goal of ensuring that folks adhere to the rules. Maybe we need somebody who needs to be away for 6 months, still in the country, but needs to have access to our systems to work because there was a major life event. How can we be open to that employee who's committed, many years to us? And so that I think we're just constantly going to have to consider these situations that present themselves and think clearly about how well we can help this employee and also adhere to what our goals are.
Yeah, it's really a totally new aspect in some ways of managing, right? I mean, really, it's in some cases it's less about managing the work and the tasks and really more about managing the individuals and their experience and helping them be successful. And that makes me ask the question to you, Shenita, what resources, what guidance, what support can we provide? Can we do a better job of providing to our managers, who even though we're now in year 4 of the pandemic and this sort of new reality, in many ways may not have gotten the support and training and assistance that they needed to help manage this. I mean, this program and this series that we're doing is an attempt to try and do that. But what else can we do, should we be doing to support our people leaders within these various situations?
Great question, Eric. So one of the things that I recommend is eCornell has the hybrid work strategy certificate, and we'll put that in a link to that in the chat. And so the certificate is a 4-course model where we cover hybrid work models, how to foster productivity and culture on hybrid teams, managing and leading hybrid teams, and maximizing collaboration and communication. It's fantastic. So I've facilitated 2 of the 4, and I can tell you the response to that course and all of the materials has been really phenomenal. So provide managers with the resources they need. Hybrid work is not going anywhere. This is our new normal, if there is such a thing. So anytime we can skill build and shore up those leadership skills through training, through dialogue, through practice and best practice strategies, we need to do that. And the hybrid work strategy certificate is one of many ways to do that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I will, if we haven't already, we'll share that information along with some other resources by the end of the program. And I know that through both the the Ithaca-based HR section of the intranet and the Weill section of the intranet, we do have resources available and that we're looking to continuously add to, and provide additional support. Marie and Erin, this isn't a question that we specifically talked about in our prep session, but you each have managers who report to you, right? Who manage others. What are you saying to them? Besides setting the example, Marie, which you talked about, so appropriately earlier, what guidance are you giving to the people leaders who report to you to help them be better leaders for the people who report to them? Erin, you want to start with that one?
Sure. In terms of being better leaders in general, which I think translates to being leader of a flex work group. We have a leadership community meeting once a month, and that's everybody at a director level or above who are managing work groups. We use a book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership very actively in that group. And we'll have one of those commitments discussed at the beginning of each meeting from a theory perspective, and we'll do some sort of practice around it or learning around it. We talk about challenges that we're facing across the board in different kinds of management scenarios, and then we'll spend a part of the time on operational types of things. Or here's this new thing we need to discuss, or it's SIP time, or how are we handling that this year? So we have that community pretty strong, and we also try to do some social engagement types of activities with that group. I'll say that group is a flexible group, a hybrid group. It's always a hybrid meeting. Some people are in person, some people are on Zoom. So one thing I don't think we've touched on much here yet is having the right technology in place to enable that to happen rather seamlessly is really important. And we have it in some spaces, not all spaces. But that's a community forum that we have for these kinds of discussions.
Yeah, I would say we have similar things. I know we're running up on time. We don't share the book, but we do have our leadership meetings, and much of the time of our one-to-ones are about how to manage specific situations going on or challenges. I do think an example is one thing, but continued manager orientation and manager training is hugely important. I love that HR is moving forward with so much of that over the last couple of years, and hopefully there'll be more of that for us, as leaders to rely on, so that we're not trying to create duplicative kind of trainings for our team members. But much of what Erin stated, we're doing as well, and hopefully we can keep those lines of communication open and keep that trust there so that people can raise the issues that they're being presented with by their staff.
Yeah, thank you both for that. I will say that that's yet another area of collaboration between the HR team in Ithaca and the HR team at Weill to look at leadership training and where we can collaborate and have even more consistency and sort of shared content in the areas that really do span any kind of campus or any kind of setting, and then of course having the sort of institution and campus specific information as necessary. So that's something that we're looking into separately as well. I think we have time for sort of one more question from me before we open it up to audience questions. And thank you to those of you in the audience who've been submitting questions along the way. I guess the last question, and I'll open this up to any of our panelists. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced, in this new reality, that either you didn't expect or that you found particularly challenging, things that you maybe didn't think were going to be an issue, but have ended up being issues that, really require a lot of time, attention, and creativity and support to address, and what have you done about them?
I'm going to start. Because we have such a strict we're very busy. So one of the things about going remote is that, you don't have 5 minutes. You don't have 3 minutes. You can be booked back to back all day long. And certainly some of us who are type A and are happy to kind of just go, it's probably not as impactful as to those who actually do need those pauses in the day, just to really take a little moment to maybe eat something or drink something, or even just walk around the block. I found that is really difficult to manage because I'm setting an example. So not only, you know I have to work a lot and I'm happy to do that, but I don't want my manager to feel like they're failing because they actually do need to build in 30-minute increments of time to actually work or to pause. And so finding that balance has been super challenging with remote work. Still being more productive. We're still more productive, I would say, for this team than we were when we were in person. But we have to acknowledge that we have to build in those pauses throughout the day to make sure that people have an opportunity to catch their breath.
Yeah, and I'll jump onto that because I think this is an active conversation in our leadership community. We're supposed to be strategic people too, those of us who are in leadership roles. And there's no time to be strategic or think strategically if you're back to back to back to back in meetings all day long. And so how do we do that? And it's not only being back to back in meetings, it's that you're not even present in your meetings because we've all adopted these other strategies like Teams or Slack or any of these things, or some people have both Teams and Slack for different work groups, that they're constantly being pinged and feeling like this fire hose is on you, and you've got your Wonder Woman bracelets thwarting off the spikes coming at you. When do you get to think? So that's a big challenge. And that has definitely escalated since the pandemic happened. Just it feels like the amount of touch. So we're talking about how to be more intentional about identifying time slots or things of that nature. Yeah.
And the only thing I would add to that is what I'm seeing, on the discussion boards and in my consulting work. Two things are bubbling up. This notion of proximity bias, right? If you have a leader who is on site and you have one or two employees that are always on site, you start developing in-group, out-group situations where, the team that's virtual is not as informed or reachable as those on site. So you have to really negotiate and be mindful of the notion of proximity bias. And that just means, again, preferring those employees who are on site versus those who are virtual. Trust is another issue that comes up as we look at leaders that are in different generations. You have baby boomer leaders, you have Gen X, etc., and they all have different mindsets. When the pandemic first happened, my leader, who was a president of a university system, was what we call a butts and seats leader. And he did not want to have any discussion about virtual or hybrid work. He was butts and seats or you're not working. So we have to be mindful of all of those generational differences with leaders and managers as well.
Thank you all. Thank you for that. And especially for the question that we didn't necessarily prepare for, but clearly you're all thinking about all the time. Linda?
Why don't we, sorry, I froze up for a second there. Why don't we move to some of the audience questions? Ashley, I think you've been looking at the questions and maybe you can start with choosing one or two.
Yes, I also want to quickly acknowledge, I know that some folks were having issues. You'll see that this is being recorded and we'll make sure that we work that out beforehand. I appreciate folks being patient and diligent in getting in. So some of the questions that we had, it's interesting because one person did note about 50-minute meetings as opposed to an hour, and that being one way to make sure that we don't have these back-to-back meetings built in. So I think that's just more of a statement, but is making me mindful as we're coming up on our time for this. So I think one of the questions that I want to go to is, how do you handle managing employees who are really struggling with the technology and using these programs that are now required in a more flexible environment?
Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I feel like it's hard to answer without more context. And not knowing what the role of the person is. And I think if I answer in a more general way, I would say whatever the job requirements are, it's a manager's role to ensure that your employee has clear expectations, resources to be able to do the job, and that includes providing any training that's necessary, removing roadblocks that they have, kind of helping them get there. And if they're not capable of doing the job, then that puts the conversation into a different place. So, I mean, that's the only general way I can answer that without more context about what's the role, and was this something that didn't require any technology before and now does? I don't know.
Sorry, I was just going to say there may be an aspect of this also that gets at some of the other things like Zoom fatigue, like, again, the building and the time, that kind of thing. I mean, some people really do struggle with managing, how to get their work done when they are constantly being, jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting with no break. So that I don't know if that's what's intended, but, again, I think that's somewhere like Marie talked about where, a manager, a leader can work with people to schedule in those times, and to make sure that meetings are scheduled for 50 minutes instead of 60, or, no more than 2 back-to-back before you have a break, those kinds of things.
And that actually gets to several of the other questions related to meeting times, that Zoom fatigue and the back-to-back. I guess I'm wondering, what I'm thinking is that we will take all of these questions. One thing that we noted as a planning team was that we wanted to take questions and perhaps use these as we build out our future panels. And so I'm wondering, Linda and Eric, if there's any final remarks or discussions that you want to have as we're closing up the time.
One of the things I would say is if you do have ideas for what you'd like to see in the future sessions, please put them into the question area, because we really want these to be as useful as possible. And we're happy to find experts, as well as I think it's really important that we continue to involve people who are supervisors to kind of share, their real experiences. So please feel free to do that either now, or if you have an idea, a few days from now or a week from now, to send it to one of the members of our team, Eric or I, with what those ideas are. So yes, please. Eric, I don't know if you want to add anything else too.
No, that really covered it. I mean, I'll just take a moment in the minute we have left, to really thank our panelists, to thank our teams for helping us put this event together, and to thank all of you who attended. Just the fact that you showed up for this, speaks volumes about you as leaders, and how much you care about your teams and your institutions and your departments. And I think that's really the part that has to flow through this, right? That no matter what, we still need to lead with empathy, with understanding, to really see the whole self that our employees are bringing to the workplace, regardless of where they are physically located, because that's a big part of what we're seeing now more than ever, as well. Both the positives and the negatives, the challenges and the advantages. There's just much more of a human-centric aspect to it, I think, than there ever was before. And that's why conversations like this are so important. So I think we'll close it out at this point. We'll let everybody go. Again, on behalf of Linda and all of our teams, and I want to thank our panelists one more time. Your insights have been really valuable, and we very much appreciate your time on this. And thanks again to our audience, and hope everybody has a really great day.